British charity group Save the Children on Friday urged the Somali government to intervene after a military court sentenced 4 teenage boys to death over their involvement with armed groups. Authorities in the north-central city of Galkayo arrested 6 teenagers in October 2020, and a military court last month sentenced 4 of the boys, now aged between 16 and 18, to death. Save the Children says the remaining 2 were sentenced to 30 and 20 years in jail. It adds that the court's decision violated the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which Somalia ratified in 2015. Although Somalia has been known to carry out executions of adult prisoners, no details were available on the executions of juvenile offenders. Joining me now on the news is Bishop C. Johnson, a former captain, U.S. Army, national security and defense strategist. Thank you very much for joining us in Anti-Continental Prime.
Thank you for having me, and good evening.
So it's estimated that 300,000 children are today fighting as soldiers in over 20 countries worldwide, while up to 40% of them are girls. Despite more than 158 countries ratifying the protocol on the involvement of children in armed conflict, why is the practice still prevalent?
Well, the reason why the practice is still prevalent is because, first and foremost, the UN as an organization does not have enforcement mechanism when it comes to, first and foremost, non-state actors, for example, terrorists, who sometimes recruit all these young children to fight for them. And even in countries that are able to ratify those international treaties, the UN also, most times, don't have that enforcing abilities to sanction those countries for using child soldiers. You just mentioned that of Somalia. And sometimes, if you even impose sanctions on a state like Somalia right now because of use of child soldiers, you end up hurting those children even more. So the sanction doesn't actually have much effect on the people that are supposed to be targeted. And so because there is no deterrence, because there is no serious punitive measures, that is why you still find that kind of practice still going on in the world, even with all the treaties and they have already appended their signatories to. So until there is a serious punitive deterrent measures against both state and non-state actors, you will still continue to see such practices going on.
Beyond child soldiers, we know that children are also being used as suicide bombers. How do we even begin to address and change this narrative?
Well, first and foremost, that is even a more serious situation, because most times the people who use children as suicide bombers are usually mostly non-state actors like terrorist organizations. They don't follow any kind of rules. They don't follow any kind of convention. So it's very difficult to stop them or even mitigate the extent to which they use children in carrying out such operations. But if the world can rally around in unity and find a very strong punitive way, such that when a terrorist is caught, that terrorist is prosecuted and made to pay, hold accountable for their actions. Maybe it might be a deterrence to would be other terrorist organizations that may use children to carry out such operations. So at the end of the days, until we have a deterrence, whether state or non-state actors, these kind of practices will continue to go on because there are no consequences for this kind of practices. That is why it's still going on.
There really should be some. I mean, let's talk about the case of the children in Somalia. Save the Children group is urging the Somali government to intervene after the military court there sentenced 4 teenage boys to death over their involvement with armed groups, knowing that sometimes these children are recruited unwillfully. Is this not a violation of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child? Isn't that enough basis to begin to, address the situation? What's your thinking, really, on the case of these teenagers?
Of course, it's a violation of their human rights. And until people who do these things are brought to, say, International Criminal Court of Justice and prosecuted for this kind of actions, we will see a reduction in this kind of thing. And with this specific case now in Somalia, I think it's unthinkable that a man who was recruited, sometimes, most of the time, they are forced into this kind of, child soldier thing, for them to have been tried as adults, even though they may be adults now, but as at the time that they became child soldiers, they were not adults, and they should not have been tried as adults. They should have been tried, or they shouldn't even have been tried because of the way they were forced or conscripted into this practice. So the world needs to rally around, and you people in the media can help to escalate this situation and get the attention of the United Nations and the world in general to see how the government can intervene and temper justice with mercy when it comes to those children who were convicted.
How optimistic are you that these government will respond, especially seeing that they've not reacted to the request from the Save the Children for these teenagers to be released?
I don't think enough effort is being made globally. I think right now the world is focused mostly on what is going on at the borders of Russia and Ukraine. And so to that extent that the attention of the world is focused there, not a whole lot of attention is being drawn to this particular matter. If we can escalate this, if we can draw the attention of the world, get the attention of the big superpowers, the United States, the UK government, the European Union, if we can get the attention to intervene in this particular case, the Somali government, I doubt, will not have much option than to respond accordingly and positively.
All right, Mr. Bishop Johnson, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us on these developments.
Thank you for having me.